Hello there, my name's Tim Walter. I'm a house healer and an alternative life coach. You need to talk to us about your degree course, the wonderful work that you're doing in quantum. Tell me about it.
We are specifically teaching Masters and PhD in a program of quantum science in health, prosperity, and happiness. In other words, health, medicine, prosperity, business, and happiness, psychology. And these are the three professions where inroads are happening at a very rapid pace and needed too. So if you take your medical training, psychotherapy training, psychology training, worldview training, you will be a different person. You will be a business entrepreneur of unprecedented scope and meaning and purpose to not only satisfy your material needs, but also satisfy your spiritual needs, higher needs to such a large extent. And you will be not only that, you will be the teachers, not only therapists and healers, but also teachers of this new way of living. So come to our university, check out our website, amitgoswami.org, AMITGOSWAMI, one word, .org.
People can do it online. You've only got a certain amount of time that they need to spend in India, is that right?
10 days per year, if the COVID situation allows.
Yeah, right.
You know, because this year we were exempted, for example. You know,
okay.
But in the proximity, a lot of transformation happens. You know, so
yeah.
people shouldn't want to skip that. It's really big transformation.
Yeah. So long as COVID is around and traveling is not considered safe, there will be no 10-day proximity requirement.
I see. Okay.
Proximity requirement is extremely helpful for transformational education that we are giving. Yeah. If you want to run transformation, you need living contact with the teacher. There is just no other way. Internet is good, but not good enough to provide that living contact.
Well, I think that because that is an example of resonance, isn't it? And coherence and correlation, surely, when you've got two people in close proximity. Yeah. So wonderful. I want to try and put some of this in context. We want to talk about humanity and its role, our place in the universe. What is our place in the universe? And we're looking at this from the point of view of our ability to interact with the infinite possibility of the quantum realm. But I want to put that into some context, because that's quite a big concept, and I think we're going to go into some interesting places over the next half an hour or so. So my first question really is directly to Amit, because I want people to really get their heads around the concept of what it really means, the infinite possibility of the quantum realm. The fact that we are manifesting and creating the material world from the non-material perspective, so from part of us. And the paradox exists that we are consciousness, and we are creating from consciousness. We are creating of itself. Now, Amit, something that you often mention in your talks is the experiment that has been done in the physical realm to measure distance. You say they use lasers and they measure tiny fractions of measurement, and it is recorded that individuals' perception of distance changes. And you say that in the quantum realm, these differences are so minuscule that this is how we perceive reality together as an objective experience. But actually, each observer has a slightly different measurement on the same target point.
Yeah, the important thing to recognize is that in quantum physics, both the object that we are measuring is a superposition of infinite possibilities. And at the same time, the brain that we are using, the observer is using to measure this, is also an infinite possibility for the observer to choose. And this is a little bit tricky because brain people conceive as a material brain, But in quantum science, it is imperative to realize that consciousness uses subtle bodies, such as mind thinking, to measure one feeling, another one, in connecting to the brain, and in the process, the brain, like a measurement apparatus in material measurements, like when we measure an electron, we use a Geiger counter. Similarly, the brain's used now is as a measuring apparatus, and in the role of the measuring apparatus picks up all the quantum aspects of the mind, for example, if we are looking at things with our sensory apparatus of the brain. So this is how we see things. So perception is then not just the measurement of the object. In the process of perception, the object possibility is collapsed, but also the subject. The brain is collapsed, and subject, the experiencer, the observer, identifies with the brain. So in this way, you see, infinite potentiality is being collapsed in both the observer, if the observer is free to choose, and also the object, if the object is not conditioned in how it can be measured. In this way, we make this favorite statement that we have infinite potentialities to choose from. What actually happens, of course, is that we become constrained by socio-cultural conditioning. Both the observing apparatus, the brain, is severely constrained, constricted. And also the objects that we look at, they too, because of repeated observation, we make memory of it. Whenever we see it gets reflected in the mirror of that memory, that compromises the choice that we make from the number of possibilities that are available. In other words, conditioning limits the number of possibilities by a great extent. So people hardly realize this. Only people who are learning to be creative see that if I remove some of the constraints that I put on, both the object and myself in terms of my brain, how much more freedom I can get. And that's the origin of the creative experience.
Fantastic. Right. Okay. Thank you. So actually, because what I was searching for in that was an answer that says each of our realities is slightly different.
It can be very different, actually. You know, today, the way people are polarized into different worldviews all over the world, the way you construct the meaning of an experience is not the same way another person will construct the meaning of the same experience. Also, your belief system that runs the programs of your brain would not be the same as the other person's belief system. The combination of the two really makes a huge difference. We complain, but the point is that, you know, everybody has his or her belief system so radically different from reality. It is true of virtually everybody, even the academics in USA or Europe or anywhere. They think that they know the world. They are the ones who know everything. But actually, they are constructing their world with the materialist dogma. Everything is matter. That seriously compromises the way they see the world. So in comparison to that, suppose somebody has a religious worldview, how much astray can they get? If today, it's funny because both sides have been equalized a lot. Both sides cause the other side conspiracy theory, but it really applies to both sides. Both sides are seriously compromised by their belief system as to what they see an event means. This is why we have so many differences between, you know, vaccine or no vaccine, what COVID, what's ceiling, what's disease.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because we've gone as a species, and this Valentina will bring you in on this as well, of course. As a species, we've gone through a massive amount of change in a fairly short time. If we look at a sort of a cosmic timescale, the consciousness, the process of consciousness through humanity and the development of possibilities and where we're going has changed extensively over quite a short period of time. And where we are is globally trying to work, basically figure out what we actually are truthfully and honestly, which is not from the materialist point of view. We can't examine what we are from a materialist point of view. We can do it from a non-materialist standpoint, but the non-materialist standpoint actually throws up so many paradoxes for people to actually get their heads around, to understand. And the nature of a paradox is it's not understandable. And so therefore we may never know our true selves, but all we can do is acknowledge the circumstance that we find ourselves in. Valentina, I'm not sure there's a question in there, but does that, so let me help you out a bit. So therefore, if we take somebody that is classified as a sensitive, a highly sensitive person, their worldview, their reality is very different to somebody that is very logically minded and not, let's say, focused on what they will only believe to be true from their limited senses, and they're not prepared to push the boundaries of those limited senses. So if we start to treat the seeming external world as fully malleable and flexible and being created from within, then anything is possible. So when it comes to, for example, relating to other aspects of consciousness that we might put a label on, such as, let's go with angels. Okay. How does that kind of work from your point of view in expressing that?
There is wonderful support there, it's even this saying that you make a step and God makes 100 towards you, right? But indeed, we have this base level human condition that you have to understand, and we are so predictable and easy to manipulate also, of course, and we keep ourselves dumbed down, right? And until we get to manifest this freedom and the power of choice that Amit mentioned, and there's a way to go. There are levels of transformation. And that's what the beauty of quantum science also, that we speak about these levels. So, and this transformation, of course, is done usually through sufferance, or if you are able to assume to live a purposeful, conscious life, And for example, extraterrestrials, which is a reality. I had my experiences and many others. So they are really looking for people who want to overcome this tendency of reciprocal destruction and to create this peaceful civilization, right? And able to cohabit harmoniously in the space. And you see what's happening now. What we want to do as a species, what you see is so much domination, and we want to conquer everything. We want to conquer even the space, but we didn't even conquer our minds, right? So where to start, And it's also obvious that the only chance of peace on Earth is that people understand that there is no real difference between all beings, So understanding that this consciousness as the background of, so there's no locality, if you want to call it, and again, that what matters is that inside of us is living the same unique light of this endless consciousness, ultimately, right? And whether we are open towards it or not, and that's the reality in every moment, and that's the basis also towards love and fraternity, which for humanity, I see it that would be a turning point to get to that, that oneness, which has to be actualized, and practiced. This non-locality has to be practiced. It's not that we are one, as you hear everywhere. We are one in potentiality, in all that infinite potentiality. Yes, and that's what we need to actualize it to survive as a human species. I say it clearly. So,
so what you're saying is that you tend to look at the oneness, because this idea of this concept of oneness is what many people, let's use this term, on a spiritual path are aiming for. They're aiming for this feeling, this amazing feeling that yes, everything is one. What you're saying is that's one aspect, that's a potential. But
yeah,
but
it's our direction to survive, actually. That's what I'm saying, because there are so many dichotomies, all these differences that are so strong inside of us, all this differentiation and separation, which leads to so much suffering and disease even in ourselves, and that has to be replaced with this unity, and that oneness and that non-locality, from where it comes, from the heart, and if not, there will never be peace.
Yeah, actually, so I think I slightly misunderstood you the first time around, because actually I thought you were saying we're not one, but actually you're saying no, of course we are, because we're coming from the quantum oneness, the field, the resonant field of infinite potential and possibility. We then go through in this standard form of human being as feeling separate, but then as we develop that awareness, or one level of awareness, we can then find that unity again and exist both as the human being and the one experience.
The way we have done it is really an amazing thing, because even 30-40 years ago it was not like this. Today we don't have any common basis for even some common elements of a belief system. So what has happened is that, that phrase that people often give, a bit simplistic but essentially correct phrase, provided it is understood properly, we create our own reality. So what has happened is that we create literally non-overlapping reality.
Yeah.
There is no overlap, and it is the overlap that is very important. That's what starts the conversation between two people, and inclusion. In quantum physics, we call it correlation. That's the basic aspect of starting a journey towards unity. We cannot even, if we cannot even touch the shadow of the other person, this is complete exclusion. And this is what is happening today. We have that tribal mindset that both sides complain. That tribal mindset has gotten extremely polarizing. So the two poles have no overlap. This is a situation which is very unstable, because how do you prevent conflict between the two groups? There is no other way of settling their differences without physical conflict, and that's the problem. How to get from here to there requires some opening. Our assumption is quantum science, we are optimistic. This is an optimistic assumption, but nevertheless has some reason to be valid, that there are about 15% of people, out of which maybe 5% are quite understanding and quite advanced in terms of how they see the world, pretty much in unison. And then about another 10 to 15% who are vacillating, some confusion, but they also see some overlap with one another. And then this vast number, 80%, 85% of world's population who are polarized. So what happens then is that these people who are in the borderline, their number changes, and the fence-sitters gradually begin to see that unity is the right way to go, and there's tremendous advantage to be had, namely health benefits, benefits of prosperity, benefits of solving problems together, such as global climate change. We cannot solve it by ourselves. One person cannot do anything. We have to somehow see common ground. So in this way, that number is crucial. As this number grows, and which must grow, because we have some unsolvable problems now that cannot be solved without some cooperation. That's a crucial thing. We have to have cooperation in order to solve them. If we don't solve them, we are doomed. So this being the case, I think a change can still happen, because after all, there is a history. And here is another very important obstruction has arisen in the form of cancel culture. They're rewriting history. Communists tries to do that long time ago in Soviet Russia. I don't know why Americans, Britishers, Europeans, especially France, are doing major revisionism. this rewriting of history is a very dangerous thing, because the history shows us the common ground, that we have had common ground before. If we abolish the common ground and say, oh, we have been always separate and always fighting, then we are really doomed, because we cannot even take some consolation or some hints from history. We have to depend entirely on new ideas, and new ideas are hard to use by itself. I'll give you an example. Quantum physics has made some inroads in terms of unifying worldviews for this 15%. Why? Because we had the spiritual traditions, and spiritual traditions have talked about unity for thousands of years. And that, suppose that history was just canceled, completely rewritten. History says that no, there was no such thing. Then a generation could very easily come to exist who have no verification of this ever, and they certainly do not have the expansion of consciousness needed to see that the reality really could be like this, oneness. And then we are stuck. We are stuck because we cannot talk to them. We cannot talk to these people with fixed belief systems and very constricted consciousness, which does not allow any change, does not allow anybody in their shadow in order to make an impact on them so that they can proceed towards change. So this is the thing, I mean, which way do we go? And of course, one hopeful thing, I think, is that there are extraterrestrial civilizations. And I think that they too are worried, and their movement of consciousness, there should be some built-in safeguard against all such contingencies that might occur. So this is why we keep a very optimistic view.
Okay, and just to reiterate there, what you're really saying is that actually we don't need 100% of people, the 7.5 billion souls that are on the planet, to get it. We need basically a 20% of the 7.5 billion to actually understand and feel united and understand that unity. That's really what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, because then that can grow, because everybody has friends, we can influence them. A friend is not going to hurt me just because we are somewhat different in opinion. We do have a common history we have shared early on. We are family, for example. So we can influence them. It's not that hard. It's harder when it comes to a stranger. A stranger is completely different belief system, because then there is that stigma. This is a stranger.
There are all sorts of issues there about the nature of the human being from a psychological point of view and a social animal and all of that sort of stuff, which is difficult. So let's not dig that hole for ourselves, because we'll never kind of come back to the place in the universe necessarily. You mentioned extraterrestrials there. Now, I can't remember whether you, Amit, sorry, Valentina, I want to bring you in on this as well, of course, absolutely. I can't remember in our last conversation whether this was something that you spoke about in our conversation, or whether it's something that I saw you saying to some other group. But you were describing, Amit, you were describing a breakthrough, a realization that actually this oneness that we talk about amongst the human species in a moment of heartfelt connection and tuning in from the heart to the quantum field, that lovely sort of spiritual experience that we can have, that unity of human consciousness. You felt it also through a galactic consciousness, a galactic. So could you tell us a little bit about that? Amit, let's start with you, and then we'll come on to Valentin.
Yeah, these are the things that we begin to experience. You know, initially, as I said, we start with a very constricted consciousness, animal ancestry responsible for that, instincts, survival instincts. And from that, we, after many reincarnations, we become quite civilized. We develop expansion of consciousness, love, family, all this. And then what happened to me in this life is that, yes, I got cultural influence in a major way in some of my adult life. But then roughly about the age of 37, I started waking up, and it was gradual. Initially just directed, how can I love my wife? Very simple question. But that opened me to discovery of truth. What is the truth of reality? I no longer could live in pseudo reality and learn to love someone, because loving someone means sharing consciousness in a major way, expansion of consciousness. So, but that search, because it was sincere, and many people are sincere in their personal search for reality and relationship, that eventually led me to a place where completely love became completely open question. How can I love anyone? And when that happens, consciousness becomes even more open and more expanded. And then I began to have these intuitions that there is a cosmic collective unconscious. We know about humanity's collective unconscious. We were at one point much more connected than we are today. And in those connected state, we created the collective unconscious. Every culture had huge connection. They initially made their own collective unconscious, but then of course the incarnation mixes the cultures up. Very soon they're sharing their collective unconscious, and it becomes humanity's one collective unconscious. Okay, all that is I understood already. And then this intuition that we need a bigger unconscious started coming to me, because we all know unconscious reservoir of memory helps creativity enormously. If we didn't have a collective unconscious where we could take advantage of all the non-local memories that people who have come before me have created. It's not just in books, it's not just, cancel culture will cancel some of these books anyway. What they cannot cancel, of course, is this non-local memory. And but the question is, they have to be open to it. Now we are open to it somewhat. You cannot make a cultural constraint so strong as not to have a human child who will always have a little bit of altruism, a human teenager who will always have some idealism, some open heart, because they have done that romantic bit. It is in the collective unconscious, it's not difficult to get into that romantic relationship with a person. And so these acquaintances are hugely helpful with the collective unconscious. Then if there were a bigger galactic collective unconscious, imagine our access to creativity. So right now, creativity is very difficult for us, because we have to basically get ideas from what we call quantum unconscious, the previously uncollapsed potentiality, this infinite potentiality that we are talking about. Most of it is in that quantum unconscious, especially the archetypal possibilities. And that makes the study of the archetype very difficult, because how do you start? How do you begin? How do you know what? I mean, if you don't have anything to stand upon, to begin the journey, it is very difficult. Of course, we are never that bad, because there are teachers even today. So things are not that bad, but still we are limited by the teacher's knowledge and so forth. If we have even more open teachers, like galactic teachers, extraterrestrials, then things would really take off. So I have begun to think that such connection got to be there. I had such strong intuition about it that I intuit that this connection is there, and I'm getting my creative ideas from that bigger collective unconscious, some of them. I become more encouraged, and then other people talk about connections in different ways, because their consciousness is open in a different way than mine, and that gives me reinforcement.
Yeah, well, wonderful.